The call came at 11:47 at night, and Nina Calloway did not answer it. She watched her phone light up on the kitchen counter, watched his name glow white against the dark screen, and felt something cold and heavy settle into her chest. She had changed her number twice in the past 8 months. He had found both of them. This was the third number. It had been active for 6 days. She did not cry. She had stopped crying around month 4, when the tears started feeling less like grief and more like a waste of energy she did not have. Instead, she moved. She opened the hall closet and pulled down the duffel bag she kept on the top shelf, not because she was dramatic, not because she had read somewhere that women in difficult situations should keep a bag ready, but because she had needed it before and learned the hard way what it cost to pack from scratch while your hands were shaking. The bag already had things in it: a phone charger, 2 days of clothes, her passport, which she had started carrying everywhere after the second time he showed up somewhere she had not told him about. Some cash, not a lot, but enough, folded and tucked into the inner zipper pocket. She added her medication, her toothbrush, and a green cardigan she grabbed off the back of her chair without thinking. It was the wrong cardigan. She realized that 3 hours later and did not care. She moved through the apartment with the kind of quiet that people who live alone learn to have. Not the peaceful quiet of someone comfortable in their space, but the purposeful quiet of someone making as little impression on the world as possible. She turned off the kitchen light. She did not take her laptop. It was too large for the bag, and leaving things behind was a choice she had made before, and she had found that things could be replaced and time could not. Her car was in the parking garage below her apartment building. She took the stairs because the elevator had a camera, and she had gotten specific about cameras. She put the duffel in the trunk, backed out slowly, and drove without a destination for about 20 minutes, just watching her mirrors, watching who turned when she turned, watching who did not. Nobody followed her, that she could see. She had learned the difference between nobody followed her and nobody followed her that she could see. And the difference between those two things was the difference between a bad night and a very bad night. She stopped at a gas station and bought a bottle of water, a bag of pretzels, and a prepaid phone card. She paid cash. The boy behind the counter was watching something on his phone and barely looked up. She was grateful for that in a way that surprised her. She used to want to be seen. She used to be the kind of woman who walked into a room and expected people to notice. That version of herself felt like someone she had read about in an old diary. She sat in the car outside the gas station for a few minutes with the engine off. The parking lot had one other car in it, a small red hatchback with its hazard lights on, nobody inside that she could see. She watched it for a full 60 seconds. Nothing moved. The hazard lights blinked in a steady orange rhythm that was somehow both alarming and completely ordinary, and she decided it was ordinary. Back in the car, she opened the Maps application on her phone and searched for hotels. Not the ones closest to her apartment, not the ones in her neighborhood, where someone might recognize her face or her car. She searched 2 towns over, found a mid-range chain that looked clean in the photos and anonymous enough to disappear into, and booked a room under a slightly different spelling of her name, the kind of difference that passes any front desk but would slow down anyone trying to track her through a registry. She had thought about this before. She had thought about a lot of things before. The drive took 40 minutes. The radio was off. She found she preferred silence now. She used to need noise, music in the background, the television on even when she was not watching it, a podcast playing through her earbuds on her commute. Now silence felt like control. Noise felt like something could sneak up inside it. The hotel lobby was bright and smelled like lemon cleaning product. A young woman at the front desk, name tag reading Claire, checked her in without any particular interest, handed over a key card in a small paper sleeve, and pointed toward the elevator. Nina thanked her, walked to the elevator, pressed the button for the 4th floor, and stood very still while the doors closed. Room 412 was at the end of a long beige hallway. She counted the doors as she walked past them, not because she needed to, but because her brain had decided counting was a useful thing to do with itself right now. She slid the key card into the slot, waited for the green light, and pushed inside. The room was ordinary. A queen bed with a dark blue comforter, a desk with a lamp, a window with heavy curtains, a television she did not turn on, a bathroom with white towels folded in thirds over the towel bar. She set her duffel bag on the desk chair and stood in the center of the room and breathed. She checked the deadbolt first, then the chain lock, which she slid into its track and tested with a firm pull. The window was on the 4th floor and faced a parking lot, which was good. She pushed the curtain aside and looked down at the rows of cars under orange lights. Nothing moved. She let the curtain fall back. She sat on the edge of the bed, still in her coat, and looked at the door. The digital clock on the nightstand said 1:23. She was not sleepy. She was not hungry, despite the pretzels sitting untouched in her bag. She was simply present, more present than she had been in months. Her senses tuned to every small sound in the hallway outside, every muffled footstep on the floor above her. A door opened somewhere down the hall. Closed. Footsteps went the other direction. She counted 12 seconds of silence before her shoulders came down half an inch. She had her keys in her hand, she noticed. She could not remember picking them up. The house key was pressed between her fingers, and there were small red marks on her palm where the teeth had bitten into the skin. She set the keys on the nightstand, rubbed her palm slowly with her thumb, and told herself she was fine. She told herself he did not know where she was. She told herself nobody knew where she was, and that was the entire point. There had been a version of her life, not that long ago, where this would have been impossible to imagine. She had been the kind of person who texted her exact location to friends as a joke, who posted check-ins without thinking, who left a trail of digital breadcrumbs because she had never had a reason not to. She had met a man who seemed perfectly normal, then gradually, quietly, the way a tide comes in without anyone watching the waterline, her life had started shrinking. First the friends she saw less, then the places she went without telling him, then the version of herself she recognized in the mirror. And then, one night, she had packed a bag for the first time, and the next morning she had unpacked it and told herself she was overreacting, and 3 weeks after that she had packed it again, and this time did not unpack it. She did not think about him as a person anymore. She thought about him as a pattern of behavior she was trying to stay ahead of. That was the only way she had found to keep moving. The heater in the corner of the room clicked on with a low hum. Nina kicked off her shoes, the wrong shoes, a pair of flat slip-ons she had grabbed because they were closest to the door, and lay back on top of the comforter, still in her coat. She stared at the ceiling. She counted the small imperfections in the plaster because her brain still needed something to do with itself. She found 11. At some point, without deciding to, she fell into a light, coiled sleep, not peaceful, not the kind of sleep that restores anything, the kind of sleep that keeps one ear open, that flinches at the ice machine running at the end of the hall, that woke her at 4 a.m. staring at the door with her heart at twice its normal speed, before she remembered where she was and why. She remembered. She looked at the door. The chain was on. The deadbolt was locked. The room was exactly as she had left it. She lay back down. She breathed. She counted the cars she had seen in the parking lot below, mentally reviewing each of them the way someone else might count sheep, finding comfort in the exercise of cataloging what she knew, rather than imagining what she did not. It was an odd kind of calm, but it was hers, and she had built it herself, and it worked. She had made it through another night. That was what it had come to, and she had stopped arguing with that fact. You make it through the night, and then you figure out the morning. You do not think past that right now, because right now the night is the whole thing. The clock said 4:11. Outside, the parking lot was still. One car she had not noticed before was parked near the far light, and for approximately 30 seconds she studied it with the specific, quiet intensity of someone who had learned that paying attention was not paranoia. It was just a car, a sedan with a cracked bumper sticker she could not read from 4 floors up, a car that meant nothing. She pulled the comforter over herself, coat and all, and closed her eyes. The heater hummed. The hallway outside was silent. Somewhere in the building, far away and muffled, a television was playing something with a laugh track, which was somehow the strangest and most grounding sound she had heard all week. She breathed. She was here. She had made it here. Nobody else was. That was going to have to be enough, and tonight, for the first time in a long time, it was. The morning arrived gray and slow through the gap in the curtains, the kind of weak daylight that does not commit to anything, that sits on the edge of the window and waits to see what you decide. Nina had been awake since 6, lying on her side, watching the thin stripe of pale light on the carpet get slightly less thin, listening to the hotel come alive around her. Doors opened. The elevator made its soft chime. Someone 2 rooms down was running a shower. The world was being ordinary outside her door, and there was something almost painful about that, the way ordinary things kept happening regardless of what was going on inside room 412. She had slept in patches, maybe 4 hours in total, spread across the night in uneven chunks, interrupted by the ice machine, a pair of loud voices passing the hallway just after 3, and her own brain deciding at regular intervals that it was time to re-examine every decision she had made in the past 2 years. She had gotten good at refusing that particular invitation. She had learned that 2 in the morning was not the right time to understand anything, and that her brain, when it was exhausted and frightened, was not a reliable narrator of events. She sat up, reached for the bottle of water on the nightstand, and drank half of it. Then she sat on the edge of the bed with her feet on the floor, and her hands in her lap, and simply stayed there for a minute, the way a person stays very still after a bad dream, making sure the room is real. The room was real, the chain lock was still on, the deadbolt was still turned. She had not imagined any of it. She had been hiding here for 1 night. She did not know how many more nights there would be. She had enough cash to cover 3 or 4 days at this rate. After that, she would need to figure something out, and she was doing her best not to think too far ahead, because too far ahead was where the hopeless version of the story lived, and she was not ready to visit that version yet. She had always been someone who planned, spreadsheets, calendars, annotated lists taped to the refrigerator, but planning required a stable foundation, and right now the foundation was 1 hotel room and a duffel bag and enough cash for a few more days. That was the foundation. You worked with what you had. She stood, picked up her duffel, and carried it to the bathroom. She showered with the efficiency of someone on a schedule she had not chosen, no lingering, always with one part of her attention on the door, even when the door was right in front of her and locked. She changed into fresh clothes, ran a brush through her hair, and looked at herself in the mirror for a moment longer than she usually allowed. She looked tired. She was tired. There was a particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from physical effort but from sustained alertness, from the constant work of paying attention to every sound and shadow, and it had settled into her face in a way that foundation and good lighting could not entirely fix. She was not old, 31 was not old, but her eyes had a quality that had not been there 2 years ago, something behind them that had seen too much of the inside of dark parking lots and locked rooms. She looked at that quality for a moment and did not look away from it. She had earned it. It was honest. She put the brush back in her bag. She ordered room service because she did not want to go to the lobby restaurant where she might be recognized by someone, anyone, who might later, innocently, mention having seen her. She ordered eggs and toast and coffee, which arrived 20 minutes later, with a cheerful knock at the door that made her take 3 seconds to steady herself before she opened it. The young man who brought the tray was barely 20, headphones around his neck, completely uninterested in her, gone before she had finished saying thank you. She ate sitting on the edge of the bed, watching the news on the television with the sound low. The news was about things happening far away, things happening to other people in other countries, in other streets, at a scale so large it made her own situation feel both completely irrelevant and entirely specific at the same time. She turned it off after 10 minutes. Her phone had 8 messages on it. She did not open the ones from the number she did not recognize. There were 2 from her friend Donna, a woman she had known since university, one of the last remaining people in her life who knew the full shape of what she had been going through, and one from her sister, Lucy, who was 3 years older and lived across the country, and called every few days with the specific cheerful worry of someone who does not know exactly how bad it is but suspects. She texted Donna, "Still okay, staying somewhere safe. We'll call soon." She did not text Lucy yet. Lucy would want to talk, and talking would mean explaining, and explaining would mean making it real in a way that talking made things real, and she was not ready for that yet. But she kept the message open on her screen for a moment and typed, and then deleted, "I am somewhere safe and thinking of you." She put the phone down. She picked it back up. She sent it anyway. She set the phone face down on the comforter and looked at the window. The curtains were closed, and she liked them that way. She had learned to like a room where she could not be seen from outside before she could see out, and this room, with its heavy curtains and its 4th-floor elevation, gave her both. She spent an hour just breathing, which sounds like nothing but was, in practice, a significant accomplishment. She sat at the desk. She drank the rest of the coffee. She looked at the wall opposite and thought about each person she needed to contact and what she would say to them and in what order, which was as close to planning as she could get right now. It was thin planning. It was planning with gaps where the certainty should be, but it was hers. She thought about calling the one person she had been pointedly not calling, a professional, a woman her therapist had recommended 6 months ago, someone who specialized specifically in situations like hers, who had an office 2 towns from her apartment, and a voicemail that said she was available for emergency consultations. Nina had not called her because calling her made it feel official, made it feel like a category, and she had been resisting the category for a long time, as if the category were the thing to fear rather than the situation that had earned it. She was sitting in a hotel room 2 towns from home with a packed duffel bag and 8 unread messages from a man who had found her 3rd phone number in 6 days. She picked up the phone and dialed. The woman's name was Dr. Carol Ashworth. Her voicemail was calm and unhurried, and she returned the call within 40 minutes. They spoke for almost an hour. Nina sat cross-legged on the bed, the curtain half open to let in the weak morning light, and she talked in a way she had not talked in months, not around things, not performing fine, not editing as she went. She talked about the night before. She talked about the bag on the top shelf. She talked about the 3rd phone number. She talked about the way she had started keeping a mental log of every car that slowed near her building, and how she had stopped telling anyone about that because she was worried it sounded like she was losing her grip on things. Dr. Ashworth said, "That is not losing your grip. That is surviving an ongoing threat. Your brain is doing exactly what brains do when they have learned the environment is not safe. The problem is not that you are paying too much attention. The problem is that you have been in a situation that required this level of attention for a very long time." Nina pressed the phone harder against her ear. "The answer," Dr. Ashworth continued, "is not to pay less attention. The answer is to change the environment so that eventually, over time, your brain can learn that it does not need to." "I am trying to do that," Nina said. "That is what last night was." "Yes," Dr. Ashworth said. "Last night was that." They talked about next steps, practical ones, legal ones, and the ones that existed in the space between practical and legal, where most of real life happened. Dr. Ashworth asked careful questions and did not push past the answers Nina gave, which Nina appreciated in the specific way of someone who had spent too long around someone who pushed past every answer she gave. When they were done, Dr. Ashworth said she would keep a slot on Thursday available in case Nina needed it. After the call, Nina felt something she had not expected to feel, not exactly better, not exactly safe, but marginally less alone inside the situation, as though a second person had come to stand beside her in a dark room, and was simply standing there with her. She did not need to be rescued. She was clear on that. She was managing. She was making decisions, and they were reasonable decisions, and she was still here, which counted for something. But being less alone in it was its own specific thing, and she had forgotten to want it because she had spent so long not having it. She spent the rest of the morning making a list. She was good at lists. She had always been a person who found comfort in the organized structure of a task, broken down into steps. It was how she had gotten through her postgraduate coursework, how she had planned her friend Laura's wedding weekend 3 years ago, how she had left him the first time, and the second time, and then stayed, and then finally left again. She made lists because a list turned an overwhelming thing into a sequence of smaller things, and smaller things she could handle one at a time. The list was practical. It had entries like, call building management, contact the solicitor whose card she had been keeping at the bottom of her bag for 4 months, research legal protection options in her county, find out what documentation she would need. It had entries like, tell Lucy, not everything, but something. She could not keep protecting Lucy from this. Lucy was her sister, and her sister deserved to know, at minimum, that she was not fine, and at maximum, that she had driven 2 towns over in the middle of the night with a bag she had kept on the top shelf of her closet. She added one more entry at the bottom of the list. She looked at it for a moment, then left it there. The entry said, figure out how to sleep through the night again. Outside the window, the silver car she had noticed that morning had pulled out of the parking lot and been replaced by a dark SUV she had not seen before. She studied it for 15 seconds, assessed it, and let it go. She made herself let it go. That was new. That was, very slightly, different from yesterday. She uncapped her pen, drew a small line through the first item on the list, called Dr. Ashworth, and moved on to the second. The afternoon passed. She ordered more coffee. She made the call to the solicitor and left a message on a voicemail that promised a callback within 1 business day. She sent a text to Donna that was more detailed than the one from this morning. She ate the remaining pretzels from her bag while sitting by the window, watching the parking lot perform its slow, uneventful afternoon theater of arrivals and departures, each car arriving and leaving without any connection to her, which was the most beautiful and ordinary thing she had watched in months. At 2:30, she realized she had not checked the unknown number for over 3 hours. She did not check it then either. She ordered dinner early, a pasta dish and a sparkling water, and ate it at the desk while reading a novel she had not touched since she bought it months ago. She read 17 pages. She absorbed maybe 6 of them, but the act of holding a book and trying to read was its own kind of ordinary, and she was hungry for ordinary in the specific way you get hungry for things you have been without too long. At 8 in the evening she ran a bath. She sat in it until the water was lukewarm, looking at the white tiles on the wall, and she thought about nothing in particular, which was the closest thing to peace she had encountered in recent memory. She got out, dried off, changed into her sleep clothes, and performed the nightly inventory of the room with a speed and efficiency that she recognized as automatic now, as habit. Deadbolt, chain, window, curtains. She did not fight the habit. Dr. Ashworth had said, "Right now, the habit is protecting you. You do not need to talk yourself out of it. The time for talking yourself out of it comes later." Later. There was a later being planned now. That was something. She turned off the main light and left the bathroom light on with the door half cracked, filling the room with a thin stripe of warm yellow light, enough to see by if she woke in the night and needed orienting. She got into bed. She pulled the comforter up to her shoulder. The heater hummed its low, steady hum. She thought about the entry at the bottom of the list. She thought about what it would feel like to sleep through a whole night. She thought, maybe not tonight, but maybe the night after. She closed her eyes. And then, because she had been awake for most of the past 20 hours, and because the room was quiet, and the chain was on, and the window was 4 floors above the ground, and nobody in the world knew the exact room she was in, her body made a decision without asking her permission. She slept. Deeply and immediately, she slept, and nothing came to interrupt it. The clock moved quietly through its hours, and the parking lot stayed exactly as unremarkable as parking lots are supposed to be, and the stripe of bathroom light held its place on the wall all night, and the comforter held her, and the room held her, and the locked door held. The morning would bring the solicitor's call back. It would bring decisions she was not yet ready to number. It would bring Lucy's voice and Donna's advice, and the long administrative machinery of protection that moves slowly but does, eventually, move. But that was the morning. Right now it was night, and she was inside it, and she was safe, and she was sleeping. That was, in every way that mattered at this exact moment in this exact room, enough. She did not plan to open the closet. That is the thing about the ordinary moments that change everything. They are not dramatic when they begin. They are small and domestic, and almost embarrassing. She opened the closet because she needed a hanger. She had hung her cardigan over the desk chair 2 nights in a row, and it was getting wrinkled, and she was a person who had always cared about things like that. Even now, even in circumstances that made caring about wrinkled cardigans a slightly absurd priority. She held on to small things like that on purpose. They made her feel like herself. It was mid-afternoon on her 3rd day in room 412. The solicitor had called back that morning, and they had spoken for 40 minutes, and Nina had a notebook full of careful handwriting covering what she would need to gather, and where she would need to go, and what the process would look like from here. The conversation had been sobering and practical, and had made the situation feel, for the first time, like something with a structure, with a beginning, and a middle, and a path forward. Even if the path was narrow and long, and required a lot of documentation she would need to hunt down from the files she had left at her apartment, which she had not been back to, and was not ready to go back to yet. She had also spoken to Lucy that morning. That call had been shorter and harder than the call to the solicitor, and it had ended with Lucy crying quietly on the other end of the line, and Nina saying, "Please don't. I need you not to right now. I am okay. I am genuinely okay," and meaning it, which was the part that surprised her most. She had said the phrase so many times in the past 8 months as performance, as armor, as a way of deflecting a conversation she did not have the energy for, that she had almost forgotten it could also just be true. She was still careful. She would always be careful now. That was a thing she had come to terms with, that some lessons, once learned, live in the body permanently and do not fully go away. But careful was different from frightened. Careful was a form of intelligence. She was making peace with careful. And she needed a hanger. She crossed the room, turned the closet handle, and pulled the door open. She froze. Not in the way people describe freezing in movies. Not dramatically. Not with a gasp. Not with her hand flying to her mouth. She simply stopped. Every muscle in her body issued the same instruction at the same moment: do not move. Her brain, which had spent 3 days running detailed threat assessments on every silver sedan in a parking lot, had the new information processed before she had consciously decided to look at it. There was a man in the closet. He was asleep. He was sitting, more accurately, arranged, against the back wall of the closet, on what appeared to be a folded pile of extra hotel linens, the kind kept in abundance in hotel housekeeping carts, white and thick and stacked with the institutional tidiness of somewhere trying to look clean. He had one shoe on. His other shoe was beside him, tipped sideways on the closet floor. He was wearing gray trousers and a dark blue shirt with a small hotel logo embroidered on the chest pocket. He was large, in the specific way of a man who had once been athletic and had been replacing the athletics with something else for a few years. His head was tipped back against the closet wall at an angle that looked deeply uncomfortable. His mouth was open. He was snoring. Not loudly, not the theatrical snore of cartoons. A small, rhythmic, deeply human sound, the sound of a person who had found the most inconvenient possible location to be unconscious in, and was nevertheless thoroughly committed to the project. Nina stood in the doorway of the closet and looked at him. For a moment she did not move at all. Her body had not yet received instruction from any part of her brain about what to do next, because no part of her brain had anticipated needing this particular instruction. She had prepared for a lot of things over the past 8 months. She had prepared for the sound of a door she had not opened. She had prepared for the moment a number she did not recognize called, and she had to decide whether to answer. She had prepared for conversations with solicitors and therapists and worried sisters. She had not prepared for this. She looked at the logo on his chest pocket. She looked at his one shoe. She looked at the linens he was sitting on. She looked at his face, which was middle-aged and unremarkable, and deeply, profoundly innocent, in the specific way that sleeping faces always are, wiped clean of whatever expression they wore in daylight. Her brain ran its assessment. This was not a threat. This was not related to any of the things she had been afraid of for the past 3 days, or the past 8 months. This was something else entirely, something her threat assessment protocol had no good category for. A hotel maintenance worker who had apparently climbed into the linen closet of an occupied guest room for a nap and had somehow not noticed, or perhaps had not cared, that the room was occupied. She had about 6 full seconds of complete, crystalline, almost philosophical silence inside her own head. And then she had one completely ridiculous thought, which was, he is going to wake up, and when he does, this is going to be a problem for both of us, and there is no version of this that is not an incredibly strange story. He exhaled, a long, slow, rumbling exhale, the kind that signals a person is sunk very deep into sleep, the kind that would in any other context be slightly funny. Nina stepped back from the closet. She did not close the door. She was worried the noise would wake him and she was not yet ready, was still sorting out what she was doing with this information. She backed up until her legs touched the edge of the bed, and she sat down, keeping her eyes on the open closet and the sleeping man inside it. Her heart was going. Not in the way it had gone on the night she had grabbed her bag and her wrong shoes and her wrong cardigan, in a different way entirely, more confused, less afraid. She sat with her hands very flat on the comforter and took a breath in through her nose and breathed it out through her mouth and thought, this is actually happening. She thought about the past 3 days, the deadbolts and the chain lock and the parking lot surveillance and the list and the solicitor and Dr. Ashworth and the bath and the 17 pages of the novel she had mostly not absorbed. She had been so careful. She had been so vigilant. She had catalogued every cracked bumper sticker on every sedan in the lot below. She had not left her room except for one brief circuit down the hall to the vending machine, and even then, she had taken her key card and stood where she could see the elevator. She had secured the room every possible way she knew how. She had not, it turned out, thought to check the closet. The man snored again. His head shifted slightly against the wall. He settled deeper, his chin dropping toward his chest, and did not wake. Nina looked at him. She looked at the embroidered hotel logo. She looked at his one shoe. She pressed both hands against her mouth. She was absolutely not going to laugh. She was absolutely not in the right situation to laugh. She had been through 3 days of the most tightly coiled tension she had experienced in months, and this was not the moment for laughing. This was the moment for being a sensible adult who calmly and quietly addressed an unusual situation with appropriate seriousness. She held both hands over her mouth, and the laugh hit her anyway. The way laughter hits when it has been building pressure somewhere and finds the thinnest possible wall to break through. It was not loud, it was more internal, a shake in her shoulders, a helpless compression behind her ribs, the very specific laughter of a person who has been handed a situation so tonally wrong for the moment that the only reasonable response is absurd delight. She got herself back under control. She looked at the sleeping man. She thought, someone put him there, not deliberately, not as a prank. He had not known she was here, or had come in before she checked in, or had found the room in the brief window between guests and slipped into the closet out of habit, or, the most probable of all the possibilities, the previous guest had checked out at midday, the maintenance crew had been through to service the room, and one member of that crew had climbed into the linen closet for what he had presumably intended to be a brief rest, and had simply not emerged. And then Nina had checked in. And then she had locked the deadbolt and the chain. And he had been in the closet this whole time. For 3 days. She looked at the closet more carefully now. There was a gap at the bottom of the door, about 1.5 inches. Air. He would have had air. There was also, she now noticed, the small wrapper of something. A granola bar, it looked like, on the floor beside his shoe, and a small water bottle, empty, that might have been from a housekeeping cart. He had supplies. He had prepared for a nap the way people who have done this before prepare for a nap. The understanding arrived slowly and with a kind of bemused respect. This was not a one-time thing. This was a man who had perfected the craft of the hidden hotel closet nap, with the dedication of a person who had been doing it for years. She could see it in the way he had arranged the linens, not haphazardly, not just dumped into a pile, but organized with the low-key expertise of someone who knew exactly how to make a folded stack of hotel linen into something supportive enough to sleep on. He had a system. He had refinements. She stood. She walked toward the closet. She stopped in the doorway and said, at normal conversational volume, "Excuse me." "Nothing." She said it slightly louder. "Excuse me." The man's head shifted. One eye opened, closed, opened again, slowly, with the particular effortful resistance of someone dragged back from somewhere very comfortable. Both eyes opened. He looked at the closet ceiling for a disoriented second. Then, with a degree of slowness that suggested he was reconstructing his situation piece by piece, and finding each piece more difficult than the last, he looked forward and found Nina standing in the doorway looking at him. For a moment, neither of them said anything at all. He looked at her, she looked at him. The one shoe sat between them on the closet floor. Then he said, in a voice hoarse with sleep and what sounded remarkably like regret, "Oh." And that was it. That was the entire word. Just, "Oh," as if the situation were merely mildly inconvenient, like finding your umbrella in the wrong pocket, as if waking up in a stranger's hotel closet were a thing that happened, and the appropriate response was 2 letters and a quiet acceptance. Nina said, "You have been in my closet." He said, "I didn't know anyone was in the room." She said, "I have been here for 3 days." There was a pause. He processed this. He looked at the closet around him with the expression of a man doing some private arithmetic about exactly how deeply asleep he had been, and what that said about him as a person, and what the most dignified path out of this situation might look like. He arrived at his conclusions without sharing them. 3 days, he said. "Yes." He scrubbed a hand over his face. "I'm very sorry." "Right," she said. He reached for his other shoe with the slow dignity of a man who had decided that whatever this situation was, he was going to exit it with whatever he had left to exit with. He put the shoe on. He stood, which required him to unfold himself from the closet floor with a series of movements that spoke to his height and to the closet's lack of vertical ambition. He was very tall standing up. He was also, now that he was upright, visibly and entirely mortified, though he was managing it with a composure she found, in spite of everything, somewhat impressive. He said, "I'm going to go." She said, "Yes." He moved toward the door. He stopped. He turned back and said, "I really am very sorry." "I believe you," she said, and she meant that too, which was the second time today she had meant something and been surprised by it. He left. The door closed behind him. The deadbolt stayed as it was because she had not locked it since she let him out, and the chain dangled from the wall. and the closet was empty, and she was alone. She stood in the center of room 412 and looked at the open closet. The folded linens were still there, one granola bar wrapper, one small empty water bottle, a slight indentation in the pile where a very tall man had spent an indeterminate number of hours in a sleep so deep it had survived 3 days of her locking and unlocking the room door. She looked at the empty closet, and then she sat down on the floor where she was, in the middle of the room, not on the bed, just on the carpet, and she laughed. Not the compressed shoulder shake from before, properly laughed. The kind of laugh that moves through the whole body and takes other things with it when it goes. Tension and fear and 3 days of tightly coiled attention, loosened and broken up and carried out by something she could not have planned or manufactured or asked for. She laughed until her eyes were wet. And then she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and she sat there on the hotel carpet for a minute, and she breathed. The carpet was rough under her palms. The room smelled faintly of cleaning product and the slight vanilla scent of whatever the hotel used in its linens. The digital clock on the nightstand said 2:47 in the afternoon. Everything was exactly as it had been 20 minutes ago, and also completely different, and she sat in the middle of that difference and let it be what it was. She had needed to laugh like that. She had not known how much until it happened. It had been sitting somewhere inside her, behind the list and the deadbolts and the careful breathing, waiting for the right absurdity to break it loose. A sleeping stranger with one shoe off had done what 8 months of very serious, very legitimate fear had not been able to do, and she did not entirely understand the mechanism of that, but she understood the result. She felt lighter, not fixed, not safe in any permanent, guaranteed way, but lighter, as though something she had been carrying in the tightest part of her chest had finally put itself down. She got up off the floor. She went to the bathroom and washed her face. She looked at herself in the mirror, the same mirror she had looked into that morning, the same face with the same tired eyes, and found something in the arrangement of it that had not been there this morning, something fractionally more like herself. She went back to the desk. She opened her notebook. She added an item to the bottom of the list. Below, figure out how to sleep through the night again. The new item said, check the closet first. She drew a check through the box immediately and smiled at the page. He was already 3 hallways and 1 elevator ride away before Nina stopped laughing, and she could not have told anyone exactly when the laughing stopped and the crying started, because there was no clear line between them. It was the same release wearing 2 different faces, and both of them were honest, and both of them were hers. She sat on the floor until the carpet left a faint red grid on the back of her ankles. Then she stood. She went to the bathroom and held a cool, damp cloth against her eyes for a moment, then set it on the towel rack and looked at herself. Then she picked up her phone and called Donna. Donna answered on the second ring with the practiced alertness of someone who had been waiting for calls at odd hours for months. "Are you okay?" she said, before Nina had said anything at all. "Something happened," Nina said. "Something bad?" Nina sat on the edge of the bed. "No, actually no. It is something I am eventually going to tell you in person, because it requires gestures." A pause. "Tell me now." "There was a man in my closet." The silence on the other end lasted long enough that Nina felt it pressing through the phone. "He was asleep," she added. "He was a hotel maintenance worker. He has apparently been in there since before I checked in. He had a granola bar." Another silence. "Donna," Nina said. "I am processing," Donna said. Then, "Did he?" "He left. He put his shoe on and he left." "His shoe? He only had one shoe on when he woke up." "Nina, I know. This is," Donna said carefully, "a lot to absorb." "It is," Nina agreed. "Are you okay?" I laughed for approximately 4 minutes on the floor of the hotel room. Donna said, "Oh, thank God," and her voice cracked on the last word, which Nina understood completely, because that particular release, the laugh, the floor, the crack in the voice, was its own kind of measurement. It was proof of something. It was proof that the part of Nina that could find something absurd and wonderful in the world was still there, still operational, still capable of being reached. Donna had been afraid that part had gone away. Nina had been afraid of that too. In the quiet moments she did not examine too closely. Neither of them said that directly. Neither of them needed to. They talked for a long time. Donna had questions about the timeline that Nina answered with the factual patience of someone giving a statement. Donna said things like, "So he was just there, asleep, for 3 days? And he just put his shoe on and left?" And each time Nina confirmed these details, there was a sound from Donna's end that was somewhere between laughter and disbelief and something more serious, something that said, "You laughed tonight, and I am going to hold that very carefully, because I know how long it has been since you laughed like that." They talked about the solicitor's appointment, and about the list, and about Lucy's call from that morning. Nina told Donna about Dr. Ashworth, which she had not been ready to do before, and Donna listened without interrupting, which was one of Donna's gifts, and the reason Nina had kept her for 18 years. When Nina was finished, Donna said, "I have a spare room," and Nina said, "I know," and Donna said, "It's been ready for a while," and Nina said, "I know that too." The offer sat between them, open and warm, the way Donna's offers always were, without pressure, without expectation, without the particular undertone of "I told you so" that Nina had gotten from other people who had watched the situation develop and had opinions about how long she had taken to act. Donna had never offered opinions on the timing. She had offered the spare room. There was a difference there that Nina had not fully articulated to herself until this moment. Sitting on the edge of a hotel bed, in a room that smelled like institutional linen and someone else's cleaning habits, and the articulation of it made her eyes fill up again for a different reason. "Not tonight," Nina said. "Maybe tomorrow. Whenever," Donna said. "The room doesn't go anywhere." After the call, Nina ordered room service for the third time. It had become its own ritual. The menu she already knew, the extension number she had memorized, the predictable knock, the cheerful indifference of whoever brought the tray. Tonight it was a young man named Oliver, according to his name tag, who had the specific look of a university student working a hotel job to cover rent, and who managed to say, "Enjoy your evening," as though he genuinely wished it for her. "Thank you," she said. "I think I will." She ate at the desk. She ate more than she had eaten at any meal since she arrived, a proper appetite, sudden and uncomplicated, the body's own opinion on the matter. She did not watch the news. She opened the novel and read 31 pages, and this time she absorbed most of them, and at one point she laughed at something on the page and caught herself mid-laugh and thought, "There it is. There I am." She thought about the maintenance worker. She did not know his name, and she was fairly certain she would never encounter him again, and she held him in her thoughts with something approaching genuine warmth. He had not done anything intentional. He had not known about her situation, or her bag on the top shelf, or her wrong shoes, or her 3 days of deadbolts and careful breathing. He had simply fallen asleep in the wrong closet at the wrong time, and woken up to find a woman looking at him with the expression of a person who has just discovered the universe has a sense of humor. And yet, the timing of it, the specific shape of the absurdity, she could not have manufactured it, could not have planned or requested or invented anything so perfectly calibrated to break open what had been sealed. She had needed to laugh at something, and the universe had put a snoring maintenance worker in her closet. She did not have a framework for that kind of coincidence that satisfied her intellectually. She simply had the experience of it, which was enough. She finished her dinner, stacked the plates neatly on the tray, and placed it outside her door. She brushed her teeth. She performed her inventory of the room. Deadbolt, chain, window, curtains. But it was faster tonight, lighter, less like a ritual of survival, and more like the mundane routine of a person who was simply careful. She also checked the closet, which took about 4 seconds and revealed nothing more alarming than 3 wire hangers and the cardigan she still had not found a better place for. She got into bed. She turned off the light. She listened to the hotel settling around her, the particular nighttime music of a building full of sleeping strangers, muffled televisions and distant footsteps, and the ice machine, and the elevator, and the long, low hum of a heating system doing its job. It was not silence, but it was safe, and she had come to understand that safe and silent were not the same thing, and did not need to be. She lay in the dark and thought about Donna's spare room. She thought about it with something that was not quite readiness but was in the neighborhood of readiness. She thought about sleeping in a bed she knew, in a building where someone she trusted was on the other side of a wall. She thought about the particular luxury of that, which until recently she had taken entirely for granted, and which she understood now, with the clarity that only comes from losing something, to be among the most precious and unremarkable things a person could have. She thought about Lucy visiting next month. She thought about opening a door for Lucy, and Lucy's particular brand of hugging, which was slightly too long and too tight, and usually accompanied by a commentary on whatever Nina was wearing, and which Nina had been deflecting for most of the past year, because hugs that lasted too long made her feel too much. And feeling too much was something she had been avoiding, the way she avoided certain streets, and certain parking garages, and certain restaurants where he had once known the staff. She was going to let Lucy hug her for as long as Lucy wanted to. She thought, "Tomorrow I will go to Donna's. I will call the solicitor back and confirm Tuesday. I will take the cardigan. I will not take the wrong shoes again." She thought, "I will check the closet." She closed her eyes. The darkness behind them was simple and undramatic, just the dark that lives on the other side of closed eyes. The ordinary dark that means nothing, and threatens nothing, and is simply where sleep lives when it is waiting. She crossed into it without a border. She crossed into it the way you cross into a room you have been in before, easily and without ceremony, because it is yours, and you know the shape of it, and you are not afraid. She picked up her phone and looked at the time. It was nearly 5 in the afternoon. The day had moved in its strange, dilated way that days move when they contain something unexpected, the hours before the closet feeling distant and thin, the hours after it feeling solid and present. She set the phone face down. She would look at the messages later, the ones she had been avoiding, the ones from the number she did not recognize. Not tonight. Tonight had given her enough to sit with. She thought about the maintenance worker again. She kept coming back to him the way you come back to a strange dream that did not frighten you but stays with you all day regardless. She did not know anything about him, not his name, not whether he had a family, not whether he had been in trouble for the nap, or whether anyone had even noticed he was gone. She did not know if this was the first time he had done this or the 100th. She suspected, based on the granola bar and the organized linens and the specific quality of his composure when he put on his second shoe, that it was not the 100th, but it was certainly not the first. She hoped he was okay. It was a small and slightly irrational thing to hope, given the circumstances, but she hoped it anyway. She hoped the hotel had not fired him over it, or if they had, that he had found another job soon, and perhaps one that made better use of his particular skill set, which was unclear to her but surely existed. She hoped he had made it back to wherever he usually went after a shift, and had a cup of something warm, and had not thought too much about the woman who had been standing in the doorway looking at him. She suspected he had thought about it a great deal. She suspected that was fair. She got up from the bed and walked to the window. She pushed the curtain aside and looked out at the parking lot in the late afternoon light, which was the amber gray of late autumn days when the sun is already making its way out of the situation and leaving everything a little cooler and a little more honest. A man in a long coat was walking to his car, a briefcase in one hand and a phone in the other, not looking up. A woman was lifting a child into a car seat in the back of a white car, a small, bundled-up child, who was cooperating with the process with great reluctance, legs straight out, small body expressing a clear preference for remaining in the parking lot. The woman was patient. The child eventually folded. The car drove away. Nina watched these things with the simple attention of someone who has been very far inside her own situation for several days, and is finding the evidence of other people's ordinary lives both moving and grounding. The man with the briefcase, the resistant child, none of them knew she was here. None of them knew anything about her bag on the top shelf, or her wrong shoes, or the 3 days of chain locks and parking lot surveillance, and the man she had been avoiding since 11:47 on a Wednesday night. The world had been doing this the whole time, she thought, just going, the parking lots and the children and the people with briefcases. It had not paused. It had not waited for her to figure things out. It had kept the ordinary machinery running while she was doing what she needed to do, and it would keep running now, through the solicitor's appointment and the documentation gathering and all the slow administrative business of making herself safe. The world would simply keep going, which was not an indifferent thing. It was a structural thing, a load-bearing thing. The world's continued motion was, in its way, a form of permission to move inside it, permission to take whatever time this was going to take. She let the curtain fall. She sat back down at the desk and opened the novel. She had read 31 pages the night before and she found her place easily, and she settled into the story with more ease than she expected, the characters returning to her quickly, the threads of what was happening picking back up without effort, as though she had never left. This struck her as meaningful in a way she could not fully articulate, that she could step back into a story she had partially read and find it waiting for her exactly where she had been, that the narrative had patience. She read until the light in the room changed, and she needed to turn on the desk lamp. She read 42 more pages. She did not count them deliberately. She discovered the number when she closed the book and looked at where the bookmark sat, and felt something uncomplicated and pleased at the accumulation of it. Outside, the parking lot had gone dark under its orange lights. The amber-gray afternoon was gone, and the evening had taken its place with the clean, decisive change of temperature that comes when the day stops pretending it is not already over. She could see 3 cars she had not previously catalogued. She looked at them for about 10 seconds, assessed them, and went to order dinner. The menu had not changed. She knew it well enough now to order without looking at it, which felt like a small, strange kind of ownership, knowing a thing by heart that you had not expected to stay long enough to learn. She ordered the same pasta as the night before because it had been good, and she did not feel like making a decision she didn't need to make. The same room service, the same table, the same sparkling water sweating a ring onto the paper napkin. She ate slowly this time. She had not eaten slowly since she arrived. She noticed the food, the actual flavors of it, the way the pasta had been made with more garlic than necessary, which was the correct choice. She noticed that she was hungry, and that eating was solving the hunger, which was an ordinary fact about the body, but one she had been too distracted to pay attention to for 3 days. The body required feeding. The body had kept going regardless. She felt a brief, warm gratitude toward it for that, for continuing to operate during the past 3 days, with the quiet reliability of something that did not need to understand the situation in order to keep functioning. She finished the meal. She set the tray outside the door. She brushed her teeth and performed the nightly inventory and checked the closet and got into bed and lay in the dark. She thought about Donna's spare room. She thought about it with something that was not quite readiness but was getting there. She thought about sleeping in a bed she knew, in a building where someone she trusted was on the other side of a wall. She thought about the particular luxury of that, which until recently she had taken entirely for granted. She was going to let Lucy hug her for as long as Lucy wanted to. She thought, tomorrow I will go to Donna's. I will call the solicitor and confirm Tuesday. I will take the cardigan. I will not take the wrong shoes again. She thought, I will check the closet. She closed her eyes. The darkness behind them was simple and undramatic. Just the ordinary dark that means nothing and threatens nothing, and is simply where sleep lives when it is waiting for you. She crossed into it without a border. The way you enter a room you have been in before, easily and without ceremony. Because it is yours, and you know the shape of it, and you are not afraid. She stayed one more night. She had not planned to. The plan, to the extent that she had a plan, had been to make some decision by the 4th morning, to either go somewhere else or make her way back towards something permanent. But the 4th morning arrived and she woke up before her alarm and lay in the quiet room and thought, one more day, one more ordinary day, in this room that had become, in spite of everything, a space she understood. She lay still for a few minutes and let the morning happen around her. The building came alive in its slow, beige way, the soft chime of the elevator, the distant percussion of a room service cart being wheeled down the hall, the sound of someone on the floor above dragging a piece of luggage across the carpet. These were sounds she had catalogued and identified and ceased to find threatening, which was its own small milestone, the kind that would have looked meaningless to anyone watching but which registered inside her like a shift in gravity. She ordered coffee and a croissant. She sat at the desk with her notebook and went through the list line by line, checking off what she had done and adding to what remained. The solicitor appointment was confirmed for Tuesday of the following week. The call to building management was still outstanding. She had left a message, had not heard back. She drew a small arrow next to it, the notation she used for things being followed up rather than things abandoned. She wrote a longer entry than usual that morning, not a list this time, but something closer to a private record. The kind you write not because anyone will read it, but because putting things into sentences makes them more legible to yourself. She wrote about the past 4 days. She wrote about the bag on the top shelf and the wrong shoes, and the way she had watched her own phone light up with his name at 11:47 at night and had not answered it, and how that single act of not answering had been, in its quiet way, one of the more difficult things she had done in recent months. She did not call it brave in what she wrote, because bravery implied a choice, and she was no longer sure she had had much of a choice. She wrote, I did the thing that needed doing, which is maybe what bravery is. She looked at the sentence. She left it. She wrote about Dr. Ashworth and what she had said about environments and how the brain learns what is safe and what is not. She wrote about Lucy saying, I'm coming next month, not to fix anything. She wrote about Donna's voice cracking on thank God. She wrote about the solicitor's steady, careful voice on the phone, walking her through the steps with the particular patience of someone who had walked many people through many steps and understood that calm was a thing you gave other people when they needed it. She wrote 2 sentences about the man in the closet and then put her pen down, because 2 sentences was exactly right. 2 sentences was the correct amount. She read them back. She kept them. She packed her bag slowly in the early afternoon. She folded things properly this time, which she had not done 4 days ago. The cardigan that was the wrong cardigan went back in, laundered now, because she had asked housekeeping and they had been perfectly kind about it. She nested her toiletries into the side pocket. She tucked her notebook in last, on top of everything else, so she could reach it easily. She did one final circuit of the room, not the threat assessment circuit she had performed every night, the deadbolt chain window curtain inventory, a different kind, a slow look at a room that had held her for 4 days, while she made phone calls and ate room service pasta, and read 31 pages of a novel, and laughed on the floor, and cried in the bathroom, and slept, eventually, deeply and uninterrupted, in a comforter that smelled like institutional laundry, and had been exactly enough. She checked the closet. Empty, obviously. Wire hangers and the last faint impression of something that had been there, now gone. She looked at it for a second longer than she needed to, and then she smiled, and she closed the door. She had not been safe here in any absolute sense. She had been as safe as she could make herself with the tools she had, which was different, which was the version of safe available to her right now, and which she was learning to accept without apology. The hotel could not solve the problem. The list could not solve the problem, not entirely, not fast. The solicitor would help. The documentation would help. The legal protection, when it came, would help. The conversation with Lucy would help. Donna's spare room, starting tonight, would help. Nothing would fix it in one movement. She knew that. She had stopped waiting for the one movement that would fix it, which had taken longer than it should have, and had cost her more than it needed to, but which she had arrived at now, and that was the only thing about timing that actually mattered, not how long it took to get there, but the fact of having gotten there. She picked up her duffel and her keycard. She straightened the comforter out of a habit so automatic she did not notice herself doing it until it was done, smoothing the surface of a bed she would not sleep in again, in a room she was leaving in a better state than she had arrived in. At the front desk, she returned the keycard to a man in his 50s with patient eyes, who asked how her stay had been. She considered the question genuinely. "Eventful," she said, "but good." He printed her receipt. She paid cash. She walked through the lobby with her bag over her shoulder and pushed through the glass door into the afternoon. The air outside was cold and clean, and smelled like rain that had already been and gone. The parking lot was bright under a sky that had finally committed to being overcast in an honest way, making everything flat and clear and unambiguous. Her car was where she had left it, unchanged, unremarkable, exactly where she had put it 4 days ago. She put her bag in the trunk and stood beside the car for a moment with her hand on the door. She was going to Donna's. She had texted that morning, and Donna had replied within 40 seconds, "The room is ready. There is food in the fridge. I will not ask questions unless you want them asked." She was going to Donna's, and she was going to stay there while things were sorted out. And she was going to go to the solicitor's appointment on Tuesday, and she was going to call Dr. Ashworth every week, and she was going to let Lucy visit next month, and let Lucy hug her for too long without pulling away, because some things that she had been declining for too long were worth accepting now. She was going to figure out how to sleep through the night again. She had already started. She got into the car. She put her hands on the wheel. She sat for a moment in the quiet of the front seat, just breathing, looking at the gray sky through the windshield. Then she started the engine. She pulled out of the parking lot. She turned onto the road. She checked her mirrors, once, the way a careful driver checks mirrors, not the way she had been checking mirrors for 8 months, and she noticed the difference between those two things, and allowed herself to mark it without making too much of it. One thing at a time, one check, one road, 1 mile. The road opened ahead of her. The trees on either side were bare and dark against the pale sky, and the distance between here and Donna's was an hour of ordinary driving, and she was going to use that hour to listen to something, music maybe, or a podcast, or just the sound of the road and the car, and the ordinary fact of forward motion. She had not listened to music in the car in months. She thought she might try it now. She pulled up a playlist she had not opened since before all of this began. The first song started with a long guitar opening that she used to sing along to badly on long drives. She turned it up 2 notches and let it fill the car. She was not fixed. She knew that clearly, in the unromantic and practical way that she had come to know most things over the past 8 months. That healing was not a single morning in a hotel room, or a list, or a laugh on the floor. That it was long and administrative and sometimes boring and required the same kind of patience as anything worth doing. She was not fixed, and she was not done, and there were hard things still ahead of her that she could see outlined on the horizon of the next several weeks. But she had gone into a hotel room in the middle of the night with the wrong shoes and the wrong cardigan and a bag she had kept on the top shelf for exactly this moment, and she had locked the door behind her, and she had called the people she needed to call, and she had made the list, and she had, on the 3rd day, opened a closet and found something so entirely unexpected and so magnificently strange that her body had remembered, for the first time in months, how to find something funny. She had remembered how to laugh. She had remembered how to sleep. She had remembered how to check her mirrors the way a driver checks mirrors, and she was doing it now, and the road behind her was empty and ordinary, and exactly what it was supposed to be. The song reached its chorus. She sang along, badly, just as she always had. She drove toward Donna's house, in the direction of what came next, in the direction of the long and ordinary work of being well. The sky above the road was flat and pale and full of light that asked nothing of her and gave itself anyway, freely, across the whole length of the road ahead. She drove into it. She kept going. She sat in the car for another minute after starting the engine, not because she needed to, but because she wanted to. She had spent 4 days doing things because she needed to, because the situation required them, because there was no choice available that did not require them. This was different. This was just sitting, just a moment of choosing to be still before choosing to move, the difference between those 2 things being exactly the kind of small, quiet freedom she was trying to remember how to have. She thought about the list in her notebook, sitting on top of everything in the duffel bag in the trunk, the checked items and the unchecked items, and the one at the very bottom with the check she had drawn through it the moment she wrote it. She had made it. Not just survived it, made it, in the way that you make something, with effort and intention, and the specific kind of stubbornness that looks like nothing from the outside, but is everything from the inside. She thought about the night she had not answered the phone. She thought about the way she had stood in her kitchen and watched the screen light up, and had simply chosen, without fanfare, without rehearsal, without the 5 conversations she had rehearsed in her head over many months, about what she would say when this moment came. She had simply not answered. The choosing had happened before she was aware of having chosen. Her body had known before her mind caught up with it. She had stood there in the kitchen light with her keys already in her hand, already knowing. That felt important in a way she was still working out how to think about. That the body sometimes knows before the mind does. That the decision was already made before she had sat down to make it. And that perhaps this was not weakness or confusion, but a different kind of intelligence. The intelligence of someone who had learned, over a long time, what she needed, and had simply gotten there. She put the car in drive. The road to Donna's took her through 2 sets of traffic lights, and then out onto a stretch of dual carriageway, where the traffic moved at the comfortable speed of a Saturday afternoon, nobody in a particular hurry, the world conducting its weekend business in a low-key and unremarkable way. She stayed in the left lane. She did not push the speed. She sang along to 2 more songs from the playlist, badly on the first, slightly less badly on the second, which felt like a measurable improvement. She thought about what Donna's house would smell like. Coffee and a specific candle Donna had been buying from the same small shop for years, something with cedar and orange in it, that Nina associated so strongly with Donna's living room that she could smell it by thinking about it. She thought about Donna's kitchen with its collection of mismatched mugs and the corkboard on the wall covered in overlapping pieces of paper. She thought about the spare room, which had a window that looked over a small garden, and a bed with a quilt that Donna's mother had made. She had slept in that room twice before, once after a long night when she had missed the last train home, and once more recently, more urgently, and Donna had not asked a single question either time. She was going back to it now under different circumstances, better circumstances, not circumstances that were resolved or finished or fully safe, but circumstances in which she had a solicitor's appointment on Tuesday and a notebook full of next steps, and a phone number for Dr. Ashworth, and the knowledge, earned hard, that she was capable of making the decisions that needed making, even when she did not feel capable. Especially when she did not feel capable. That was the thing she had learned over the past 8 months, that she had not been taught anywhere and which no one had told her was coming. That capability and feeling capable were two separate things, and that most of the work happened in the gap between them. The dual carriageway ended and the road curved down into the neighborhood where Donna lived. Older houses on wider streets, trees that had been there longer than any of the houses, roots lifting the pavement in places into a gentle, impractical buckle. Nina had always loved this street. She had loved it for years before any of the past 8 months, had loved it on ordinary evenings when she was just driving over to see a friend, and she felt that love now as a kind of continuity, a thread running from the before to the now, unbroken, proof that something of what had existed before was still available. She pulled up in front of Donna's house. The light in the front window was on. She could see the edge of the curtain, warm behind the glass. She sat in the car for one more moment. She thought about room 412. She thought about it with something she had not expected to feel, which was a kind of affection. Not for the room itself, which was beige and anonymous and smelled like cleaning product, and had a heater that clicked on and off all night, but for what the room had held, for the fact that it had held her, 4 nights and 3 days, while she made the calls and wrote the list and read the novel and ran the bath and laughed on the floor. It had been exactly enough of a room. It had done exactly what a room needed to do. She thought, I will not come back here. I do not need to come back here. But I will remember it. She thought about the closet, empty now, with the 3 wire hangers and the slight indentation in the linens. She thought about the moment she had opened that door and found a sleeping stranger with one shoe off, and the 6 seconds of crystalline silence before the laugh that broke everything open. She was going to tell that story for the rest of her life. She knew that with a certainty she had not felt about many things recently. She was going to tell it at dinner tables and over phone calls, and in the years from now when things were different, when the administrative machinery had done its work, and the situation had changed, and she was not in it the way she was in it now. She was going to tell it as the story of the week she stayed in a hotel room with a packed duffel bag and a list of next steps, and ended up discovering that someone had been asleep in her closet for 3 days, and she was going to tell it as a funny story, and it was going to be a funny story, and it was also going to be the true story of the moment she remembered she was still herself. She opened the car door. The cold evening air came in around her, sharp and clean. She got out. She went to the trunk and lifted out the duffel bag, lighter now that she had worn through 2 days of clothes, lighter in the specific way of something that has been used for its purpose and can rest. She swung it over her shoulder. Donna's front door opened before she reached the path. Donna was standing in the frame with a mug of something hot in her hand and a look on her face that Nina recognized. Not the worried look, not the careful look, not the one that meant Donna was managing what she was feeling so Nina would not have to manage it for her. This was the other one. The one that simply said, "You are here. I am glad you are here. Come in." Nina walked up the path. She was not fixed. She was not done. The work ahead was long and would require the same kind of patience as anything worth doing, and there would be hard days inside it that she could not yet see the shape of. But she was here, in front of a house with a light on, and someone was standing in the door, and the cold evening air smelled like the beginning of something, and she was moving toward it. She went in. The door closed behind her. The ordinary, important, unheroic work of what came next had already begun.